Hey, for all the authors that are listening out there, I wanted to share with you this great email that we received here at the Reading with Your Kids podcast from Dr. Linda Mubarak. She is a past guest and the author of Maxine's New Job. Here's the email. Dear Fatima and Jed, good news! Maxine's New Job has been nominated to receive the prestigious Henri Award at the 2018 Christian Literacy Awards for Outstanding Literacy Work in the Children's Book Division. I sincerely believe your certifying Maxine as a great read helped bring increased social media attention to the book. Thank you for the exposure and the great marketing. We are so happy for Dr. Linda Mubarak that her book, Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read, Maxine's New Job, received this prestigious recognition. We would love to help your book receive that same kind of recognition. If you are interested in having your book considered for our Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read program, please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. You can click on the contact button, send us a note, and we'll send all the information back to you, or you can go right to our Certified Great Read page on our website. It's fun, it's easy, and it is really an effective way to let the world know that your book stands out above all the rest. The Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read program.
Reading with Your Kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Javli, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, an iHeartRadio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award nominee. We are so delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show in the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Talitha Shipman. She'll be here to celebrate Finding Beauty. Before we begin our celebration of Finding Beauty, we would love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. So much is going on. April 22nd, we will be debuting a special series of episodes called Protecting the Planet with Your Kids. I'm really excited. My co-host, Alexia Brown, and I will be introducing you to some amazing guests. We're going to be able to tell you how to talk to your kids about climate change, why it's important to talk to our kids about climate change, and giving you some great activities, some great awareness, some great things you and your family can do together to start protecting our beautiful planet. And later in the month, be sure to check out our conversation with Ilyasa Shabazz, the daughter of Malcolm X. She'll be here to celebrate Awakening Malcolm. That's all happening on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. If you sign up for our newsletter at readingwithyourkids.com, you will be the first to know about what's coming up on the show. And of course, we want you to subscribe to the podcast wherever you find your podcast. Join us right now from beautiful Fort Wayne in Indiana. Our guest is a celebrated illustrator, but she's here today to celebrate the first book that she is the illustrator and the author of. It's called Finding Beauty, and our guest is Talitha Shipman. Talitha, how are you?
I'm great, thanks.
Really happy to have you on, and I guess the first question is, what was it like being an author for the first time?
It was really exciting. It was different than just being an illustrator. There's a lot more to do to get my manuscript ready, and also working with an editor. Editors have suggestions, and, they maybe want to change your story a little bit. And as the writer, I felt a lot more protective of my work. And so I had to kind of work through that and be okay letting go of some things, I guess, especially when, the editor might have some good suggestions. And you just need to realize, okay, they're trying to help make the story the best it can be. So being willing to collaborate and work with an editor in that way. It's a little bit different when you're writing the words as opposed to just doing the illustrations.
That's really interesting. So as an illustrator, you're typically working with an art director, and I imagine that you will oftentimes get notes from that art director, asking you to make changes and suggesting different ways to go with your illustrations. You found it more difficult or more challenging, having somebody critique your words than your art?
Yes, definitely. And I think maybe that's just because this is the first time I've had my words critiqued in that way. I've been illustrating for 10 years now, so I've gotten really used to people giving me notes on my art. So it might take me a little bit just to get used to having people say, oh, hey, maybe you need to change this word or take this sentence out. And I think that it worked out very well, and I'm really glad for that collaborative process, because I think in the end, the final product is always better when you have more people working on it, and they all add something to that story in the end.
That's really fascinating. I would have instinctually thought that, as an illustrator with all this experience behind you, you might have that attitude of, who are you talking to? I know what I'm doing. I don't need you to help me. But I guess it makes sense if I think about it, with the right part of my brain, is that as an illustrator, as you've grown and had that experience and confidence, it's probably a little bit easier to look through other people's eyes and to see your work with different eyes and perspective.
Yeah, and I think anytime you're doing something new, there's always that learning curve. And so for me, I've been practicing my writing for a long time, but this is the first time that someone's actually said, okay, yes, we love your writing, we're going to publish it. So there was a lot to learn, definitely, and there still is a lot to learn, I think. Mm-hmm.
Well, we need to learn what Finding Beauty is all about.
Yes. So basically, in a nutshell, if I was going to give you the elevator pitch, Finding Beauty is all about observing and finding beauty in things and people that might be overlooked normally.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've always been this way, kind of, even as a kid. I've been a person that really hones in on details, and I notice little things. And I've always wondered if other people notice the same things as I do, or perhaps they notice different things, but they're, just as interesting to them. But I wanted to write a book that hopefully kind of conveyed that noticing little details, little things that are beautiful, or even things that a lot of people might say, oh, that's kind of ugly, oh, I don't like that, to see those kind of with new eyes, so that I don't know, I think there's this tendency, especially nowadays, we've got a lot of technology, you've got iPads, you've got iPhones are always on, and if you just stop and kind of look around you and start observing, you're going to see amazing, beautiful things that you might have missed otherwise.
Interesting. I've had a couple of illustrators on in the past, and they suggested that if your kids want to be an illustrator, one of the ways that they develop the illustration is noticing minute details that a lot of us might overlook. And the examples that they gave is, just the shape of an eyebrow can really just turn, can communicate so much. If you bring the character's eyebrows up, it can communicate one thing. Bring them down and narrow them in, communicate something else. And that's something that they learned through observation. Do you think that this is, comes naturally to an illustrator, or is it something that you had to learn?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think some people might just naturally be more keyed into details, but you can definitely learn how to do it, for sure. What a lot of teachers, art teachers, especially like in my college classes, suggested was just to have a sketchbook and carry it around with you everywhere and sketch just random things. I mean, you could sketch your toaster or people waiting in line, or if you're riding the subway, or go outside and sketch flowers, plants, rocks, whatever. And so you'll start to train your eye to notice those little details. It's
really interesting. One of the things that you mentioned to me, as folks probably know, when you're setting up an interview to be on a podcast or a television show or whatnot, there's some communication that goes back and forth between the producer and the guest. And one of the things that you wrote to me was, the more perceptive we become of the world around us, the easier it is to be empathetic and caring and to notice the value of people and things that we often overlook. I found that was a really profound quote, and I'd love for you to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think there's a tendency for a lot of people, myself included, to kind of be in our own heads. So we start to focus on ourselves, whether that's good, whether we think, oh, I'm really awesome, or if we're getting down on ourselves and maybe feeling sad or depressed, and just kind of closing off the world. And so I think that if we learn to observe the world, that takes us outside of ourselves. And for women and girls specifically, I was thinking about how we can kind of pay too much attention to what we look like. And, a lot of times that means we're focusing on the negative things about us. And that really hurts girls' self-esteem, And so I was trying to find a way to express kind of a different view of beauty. So if we start looking at other people, other things, and noticing beautiful things about them, then we're taking the focus off of ourselves. And I think that's really healthy because we're not going to feel so just wrapped up in ourselves and feeling down about ourselves. We're going to be uplifted by those beautiful things. It's pretty hard. Like, if you're standing outside and you look up at the stars and they're just so beautiful, and pretty soon you're not thinking about yourself. You're thinking about, how many stars are out there? Are there other, sentient beings out there maybe that are looking back at us? Like, there's so much to think about just by looking up at the sky and observing and absorbing that beauty.
Wow, I really like that, especially to use this, to get in the habit of observing beauty around you and looking for the beauty around you as a way to kind of get off the focus. A lot of times, we really focus on the negative. We've talked here on the podcast that, if you're an author, if you're a podcaster, if you're a magician, you can get 1,000 positive comments, but someone might write one negative thing on social media or send you a negative email, and that's the thing that you stress out about.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah. I do that all the time. That's so hard to not do that, right?
Well, yeah, I think it is. And I think that, your suggestion of us really being intentional in going out and not just like coming across, and when you come across something that's beautiful, I remember being in Puerto Rico with my beautiful wife and driving up over this kind of not a mountain, but a very tall hill and curving. And as we crested that hill and went around that curve, we saw this amazing view of a beach and the shoreline, and it was just spectacular. And when those kind of moments of beauty kind of hit you, that's amazing. And I mean, this happened to me almost 30 years ago, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. But to go out and to intentionally look for the beauty that is surrounding us every single day, I think that can be a really useful exercise.
Yeah, and I think it's always there too. I mean, just the other day I was over at my mom-in-law's house, and she has this little amaryllis flower bulb that she's had since Christmas time, and it's got one last flower on it, and the sun was hitting it at just the right angle that the petals were like sparkling, like they looked like tiny little diamonds. And I just stopped and I was like, wow, that is so cool. Like, I don't even know why that flower is sparkling. Like, it must have something to do with the cells in there, or, who knows, maybe there's some pigments that sparkle. And I just stopped and looked at it for a long time, and I even took some pictures, and I showed my daughter, and I'm like, Coral, come look at this. And she had the same reaction. She was like, wow, that's so cool. And so I think the more you train yourself to do that, you just stop. Maybe you're just standing in a room and you just stop and look around you and just be like, what's interesting in this room today? Like the way the shadows are playing, like maybe, the sun's coming through the window and their leaves are kind of rustling and making these moving shadows on the carpet. Like there's so many things that you can just get lost in that are beautiful that are pretty mundane, honestly, when you think about it. We don't usually notice those things at all.
Yeah. I think that this would be, as I said, I think this would be helpful for all of us to do, but I think it can be an especially fun thing that we can do with our kids. Imagine if every week, maybe once or twice a week, we just, got together with our kids and went someplace and just challenged each other to go and find something beautiful.
That would be a wonderful thing.
It really would be. And I love,
yes.
A lot of times we're not able to see the beauty in something until somebody points it out to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That other person has a different perspective too. Like and you might be able to come back and say, oh, well, look at this thing that I think is beautiful. And so then you're teaching each other. That's where kind of the empathy comes in, right? I'm seeing something from someone else's perspective as well.
Yeah. As you're talking, I think, this would be a great exercise, not only just, to become more aware of what's around you and finding the beauty in your surroundings, but to do this exercise intentionally to help kids understand that people have different perspectives, to start having a conversation about that, which can lead into them better understanding the differences in the people that they're going to experience over the course of their lifetime.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So what was it that inspired you to get out of your comfort zone? You're illustrating and you're comfortable. You can take suggestions and criticisms, and that's easy for you. You just roll with the punches, and then you decide to move from that comfortable spot into the author's seat. And now, this is really difficult. I haven't done this before.
Yes. Well, it's funny. I for the past, I don't know, ever since I could remember, I've been telling little stories with my art. When I was a kid, I did tons of cartoons. That was just something that I really enjoyed. And when I decided I wanted to be a picture book illustrator, it was always my intention to write stories as well. But that was a bit more difficult than I realized, because I had training in art, but I hadn't really had as much training in writing. And for some artists, it comes really naturally, honestly, to make that transition from illustrator to author illustrator. But for me, it was just more difficult. I think I had a lot to learn, and so it took me a few years to kind of figure out how to write. And in the voice that I wanted to write in. And so it was always something that I felt compelled to do, I guess. Always something that I knew I wanted to do. Just had to try to figure out how to make it happen, honestly.
Well, I'm really glad you did. And I'm really happy that to have you here on. We've talked about the value of reading with our kids, and we've gone over those values lots of times. We talked about some of the values today, helping kids understand that we all have different perspectives, helping them be more aware of the world around them will help them notice the value of people and things. One of the things that we suggest here on the podcast is, especially with our younger ones, before we read a story for the first time, maybe cover up the text and just take a picture walk through the book with your kids and just look at the illustrations and talk about them and imagine what the story could be. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term, but can you kind of think about the benefits of doing that with kids before you read the text?
I think that's a great idea, actually. It kind of reminds me of, if you have a wordless picture book. And we've read a few wordless picture books with my daughter, and it's always so fun to kind of come up with the voices and the story. And, she's old enough now that she's even adding, she's coming up with her own stories. And so to do that beforehand, I think would be a lot of fun, because then when you have the words in there might be some differences, right, between what you and your children thought about the story and what the author thought the story was. You might have it dead on, but you might have some differences, and that's fun to kind of compare and contrast those differences and to get their imagination going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I think about as you were talking and taking the reading those wordless picture books, I'm thinking somebody out there listening might say, well, how do you read a wordless picture book? But actually, it's something it's something that we do naturally. Although a lot of families don't have these things anymore. They're really ancient. They're called photo albums. And they were these things. If you're not familiar with it, it's a wonderful thing. It's like a book with blank pages, and you know, some of them have little slots, and some have the cellophane that you can open up and put pictures and photographs in. And that's something people don't know about. I
have a few of those.
Yeah,
I'm old enough to remember, definitely.
Yeah, but now we do it with our phones, and we scroll through our pictures, and where, you know, that's, you know, when you're doing that with your kids, you're reading a wordless picture book. There might be a story that you remember, but it's really a fun activity to do with our kids.
I think I'm going to try that with some of our picture books that do have words. I'll get some new picture books in the library and give it a try with my daughter.
That's wonderful. So tell me, now that you took the plunge, now that you went outside of your comfort zone and you became an author illustrator, are there going to be more books coming from the pen of Talitha Shipman?
I sure hope so. I've got a bunch of manuscripts that, you know, some of them probably aren't good enough to make the cut. That's okay. I think sometimes when you're just writing, like, you just write down an idea and, you know, you might realize, oh, I don't think that idea is going to work, and you kind of throw it in a drawer for a while and let it percolate. But I do have a couple of story ideas that I'm really excited about that I hope get turned into books someday.
That's wonderful. Here's a crazy question. Do you ever imagine that you'll be comfortable enough to write a book, write the words, and then let somebody else illustrate the story?
That is a great idea. Or a great question, sorry. I think yes, eventually, and I think it would have to be a story that, if I wrote the story and realized, boy, I am not the right illustrator for this story, if there's a particular style, or actually there's a couple of illustrators that I know of that have done that have made that jump into, they still illustrate their own books, but they are also just writing books. So I think, yes, definitely. I've had a couple of story ideas that I just knew, because I've been illustrating for 10 years, I'm not the person to do the art for this. Maybe someone else, you know, at some point, if, you know, I get this idea developed enough to become a full manuscript that I can submit to publishers. So yeah, I think that's definitely something that I'd be willing to go for. It might be a little bit tricky because, again, you as the writer who's also an illustrator, I have visuals in my head, right, as I'm writing the story. And a lot of writers, they might not have such strong visuals in their head as they're writing. Some of them do, but some of them don't. So that would be another thing that I probably would have to get used to and let go of, because that other artist is going to have their own interpretation of the words.
Yeah. Fascinating. I love talking to illustrators and authors and publishers about the process. I find it fascinating, and I hope that our listeners find it fascinating too. I think, you know, I always thought, you know, an author woke up one morning and he wrote the book and threw the pictures together, and then, you know, a week later it becomes a book. And it's a much more complicated process than that.
It's like 3 years later, there's a book. Sometimes even longer, yeah.
Well, we know that we can find you in Fort Wayne, Indiana, but we don't know where we can find you on the internet. Where is your website?
My website is TalithaShipman.com. And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter as @Talitha Shipman Illustration.
Well, we've had a great time speaking to the author and illustrator of Finding Beauty, Talitha Shipman. Talitha, thank you so much for being part of our show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Jed.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be J.B. Frank. JB will be here to celebrate 1, 2, 3, Count on Me, and also Somewhere in the City. You know, somewhere in the city, there is an author out there that's really, really frustrated because it's so difficult to get people to notice their fantastic children's book. Well, as you heard at the very beginning of the show, we have a program called the Reading with Your Kids Certified Great Read Program. And it's helped an awful lot of authors help their books stand out from the thousands of books that are published every single month. You may want to check it out. You can find out the information by going to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page. Scroll on down to Certified Great Reads. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so very, very wonderful. Of course, want to start by thanking our guest, Talitha Shipman. Be sure to check out Finding Beauty. Also want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Alexia Brown, Hannah Pat Oboyski. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to join together to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.